Now we can proceed directly to the assembly and deployment of the eShop online store. I have developed the store for demonstration purposes for these lectures. It will be used as a testing object, and let me tell you more about its architecture. The store can be represented as a front-end part and a back-end part. The front part is when we go to the store's address in the browser and open different HTML pages. CSS styles, images, and scripts written in JavaScript are linked to them. When the user interacts with the web interface of the store and selects, for example, products, the JavaScript code is being executed. This code sends HTTP requests. Requests use JSON as a body format. The endpoint of the request is the backend written in Java. This is a regular HTTP server that processes requests, serves the sessions, and represents the entities that users work with in the form of corresponding objects, such as categories, products, orders, database, and so on. While the application is running, it will use various resources. For example, some of the resources are stored in the final jar file, such as pictures of the products, pictures of the categories, and also some of the project resources are stored outside the final jar file, such as configuration files, startup files, and database. The project is written in Java and the Maven tool is used for assembly. So the specified command should be executed to create the final distribution package. Then it only remains to run it as a service on a remote machine. Now let's correlate the presented scheme with the source code of the application, run it locally, and automate the assembly and deployment to a remote machine using Ansible. First of all, you need to study the contents of the pom.xml file. It is divided into two parts. In the first part, the exec plugin is used. We have already met with it before when we set up the configuration to launch the eShop online store. When it is executed, the store is launched on your local machine. And in the second part, there is a task which will be responsible for assembling the online store into a final jar file, as well as copying all the necessary external resources to the distribution folder. As it was demonstrated earlier, we have the resources. I have allocated some of the resources to a separate folder, and they will be only used by the Maven exec plugin to run the application on the local computer. Some of the resources will be placed inside the final jar file, like JavaScript code, images, CSS styles, and HTML pages. You can learn more about how resources are located inside the distribution package inside the pom.xml file. And we also have a directory that contains the source code of the store. There are various packages. Packages contain classes. From the content of the classes, you can understand what they mean and what functionality they perform. And now let's assemble our online store. To do this, you need the Maven package command. It's been launching, and we are waiting for the completion of the build. The process was completed successfully. The dist folder appeared, which contains the distribution package of our online store. Open the config file that contains the settings with which the online store will be launched. It will accept requests on port 4000. And will use the eShop database by relevant path. There is also an online store in the form of a jar file and login configuration. And there are also two files with extensions bat and sh with which you can run application on Windows and Unix-like systems. Now let's launch an online store and go to its web interface. To do this, run the exec task for execution. It is necessary to find out the port on which the online store will accept our requests. To do this, open the corresponding configuration file. This port and this database will be used. So in the browser, go to the localhost 8888 and add the eShop. And we are greeted by the front part of the online store with a welcome message. Let's close it, shut down online store, and make sure that the Java process is no longer running. Now the online store is completely disabled and the page does not load. And now it's time to study the Ansible playbook, which will assemble an online store and deploy it on a remote machine. Go to the corresponding directory in the project structure. Again, in the default directory, we encounter variables. The eShop src_dir variable points Ansible to the path to search for the source code of the eShop project. The files directory contains a special configuration file that will allow you to run an online store as a service on a remote machine. The task directory contains two tasks, the first of which is called build and it is responsible for assembling the final distribution package. First, it goes to the eShop folder and deletes the previous version of the distribution package. Also clears the target folder from previously compiled files. Overwrites the IP address of the web server to the current one in the application startup file. This is necessary so that it starts correctly and in the future we can connect to it and watch JMix metrics. Let's open the startup file and take a closer look at the JMix settings. The file lists the various parameters with which the online store will be launched, and the JMix settings will allow access to them. This IP address will be redefined in the future. After that, the familiar package command is launched. Next, the second task is launched, which first installs all the necessary repositories. Next, Java is installed, and eShop directory is created. The distribution package is copied to this directory, and the corresponding read and write permissions are set. Then permissions are granted to run jar file and startup files. In the future, the online store is launched as a service. The contents of the playbook itself are different from what we saw earlier. It is divided into two parts. The first part is executed on the local machine. The task of building an online store is started. The second part is performed on a remote machine, where the task of deploying the application is launched. And now let's launch this playbook. open README file, copy the startup command and send it for execution. The playbook was executed successfully. Now you can copy the address and go to the web interface of the online store. The test object was successfully assembled and deployed on a remote machine.